Did you say we're
both gonna step away so you can see what it is.
Yeah.
Or not.
No, you have to. Guess who's back? Project Backmarker. Welcome to VTEC Academy. You're about to get schooled. All right, guys, we are here with Project Backmarker. It's been sitting for a long time, and I've been going back and forth with what engine to do. I pulled apart a ZC. I was thinking about putting that in. The ZC was pretty ragged. We'll probably use it for something else. It needs a lot of work, though, in order for it to work properly. But I have finally chosen a motor, and the motor I'm going to use is a B18C1 GSR motor. But that's out getting rebuilt right now. So I've got another motor we're going to use right now. That's this one right here. This is a B17 A1. This is from a 92-93 Acura GSR, and we are going to put this motor in this car. So which chassis do we have? We have an 88-91 Honda Civic, same as a CRX, and we're basically going to be installing a B18C1 into this car. Now, for the transmission, we also decided to go with the GSR transmission. The reason is it's a cable operated transmission. So basically, we can use our normal clutch cable to operate this clutch, and everything should work just fine. So today, we're here to set the motor in the car, make sure everything looks good, hooks up right, and then we're going to start working on getting it running. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining us on another episode of VTEC Academy. Let's get started. Okay, so engine prep was done some time ago. There's other videos showing what we did, but basically we got inside and took the old motor out. It was just a D15 with throttle injection. We then went ahead and built a wiring harness, and the wiring harness we built was originally for the ZC, but I decided to put VTEC plugs on it just in case we put a VTEC motor on, which was prescient, and because that's what we decided to do. We're putting a VTEC motor in. So if you want to go back to earlier videos, you can see what we did to make the harness and everything, and what modifications we made to the engine harness inside the car. We also painted it a satin black. Originally this car was red, and the red just wasn't working for the engine bay. Unfortunately, after painting the whole thing and changing my mind and deciding to put a VTEC motor in, we're going to have to make one more modification to the engine bay. What's going to wind up happening is, with the B-Series transmission, is the alternator is actually going to interfere with this part of the frame rail right here. If you look at the cars, how they come in Japan, there's a curve outward right here to make room for the alternator. We don't have that, so we're going to have to put a dent right there. But first thing we need to do is install the motor, see where it's going to interfere, mark it, and then put a ginormous dent in there, and then repaint it. How many cool. Jeez.
It's zip tied right here, but I think I can. There you go.
Oh man, I tore that puppy up.
Oh.
I'll order a new one.
I think
There's shims under there, and the shims were holding it.
still got the factory shims.
Okay, so the mount kit we're using is a Hasports EFB1 mount kit. We also added this block bracket. Now, a B17 actually comes with this block bracket on it already, but if you're doing some other B-Series engine, it probably has a different block bracket, like using a B20, using a B16A2 from a later model car, or like a Del Sol VTEC or a B18C. You're going to want to get the proper block bracket, and the block bracket is from a 90-93 Integra. So we have the billet one on the car here. We had this engine in actually a CRX race car we're running, but this will be our driver's side mount, our passenger side mount, and our rear mount. So we're going to, oh, and one other thing, the rear transmission bracket. We also have a Hasport rear transmission bracket. This basically is a copy of the one for the DA Integra. So that also is going to be necessary for this engine swap, is either the Hasport one or the DA Integra one. Anyway, got all the everything we need to put it in, so let's go ahead and do that. Oh, you know what I want to do is I want to loosen the alternator and push it all the way in so that it doesn't hit, because it's when it's adjusted that it usually makes contact. As we do the swaps, we're going to go ahead and leave everything just finger tight so we can get a little adjustment out of them.
Oh, you can't see anything.
Keep going. And stop.
Now,
Need to go up or down?
yeah, up or down.
Jeez. Almost. We look down here, we can see how close that is right there. And if we were to adjust this back, it goes back almost 2 inches. It's definitely gonna strike it. As we tighten it back, you can see it's making contact here now. So what we need to do is we need to come back here by about 1 inch and put a dent in, probably about 1/4 inch in, and that will allow us to clear as we tighten up the belt. I have in the past actually used a shorter belt and be able to get it in, but it seems like it slightly makes contact sometimes. But anyway, let's give it a try.
Bada boom, bada bing.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
like,
that's a lot of putty.
yeah, that's a lot of putty, so that's been replaced. Get a big hammer. And then repaint. Of course, repaint it. Yeah. One of the things about banging this, if you want to be accurate with your hits, this is how I suggest you do it. You take a hammer and place it where you want the hit to be, and then you take another hammer and hit that, so that you're transferring in a spot. Because hitting it exactly where you want to, swinging it, is not always easy to do, particularly in the confines of an engine bay. So sometimes, in order to be accurate, I find that you place it where you want, strike the other hammer, and it puts a dent more or less sledgehammer surgically in the place you want it. I think it's enough. So we're gonna try the motor in again, see if it's enough. If it is, take the motor out, paint it, put it back in.
I think.
Here's that I need to put a little bit more. Just a slight bit more on the bottom. So I kind of dished it a little bit, and down here towards the bottom of the frame, that needs to go in a little bit. There's plenty of clearance up top, plenty of clearance to go back. Let's so that's tight. So yeah, you can see down at the bottom of the pulley, come forward, it's awfully tight down there. So a little more denting.
I thought that was a firecracker.
I actually feel confident enough to paint it rather than try it in again. So you know what that's called, right? Famous last words.
Gonna be the fuzzies in it. Nice thing about that color is that it blends well.
Yeah. Pro tip, by the way. If you want to reuse your paint, like I have paint that's 20 years old, 2 things. After you get done using it, turn it upside down and spray till no paint comes out. That'll clear the nozzle. And the other thing is, when you store it upside down. That way the ball doesn't get locked into the bottom with all the thick stuff. It's a lot easier to mix up. I have stuff that's It's literally 20 years. I bought 23 years ago and still use it.
Nice.
I'm going to go empty it out. This is my harness I converted for ZC. If you recall, in an earlier episode, I changed it over to port injection. Also added another sensor for the distributor. And then I decided, hey, let's not put a ZC in it. Let's put a VTEC motor in it. So now I have to add more stuff. Now, luckily, when I did the car, I added a few extra wires because I knew at some point I was probably going to put a VTEC motor in. But what I hadn't done was modify the engine harness itself. So I taped it all up nicely. It's all ready to go. But now I have to untape it so I can make some changes. So anyway, let's take a quick look at the engine where I kind of discuss all the plans, or actually the modifications I need to make to the harness. This is the engine that's going in budget EDF. This is a 1992 B17 from a Acura GSR. So I've decided to go ahead and use this because the cable transmission is compatible with our car because, of course, we have a cable clutch. With this engine going in, I'm going to have to make some changes to the harness. Originally, I built this harness for a ZC, so there's some differences I need to take care of. To start off with, let's look at the distributor plugs. This plug only has 5 wires. And of course, this is a power and tack. That's going to match there. But this has 7 wires. So what's happening is there is a sensor that's on the front of the motor that's now going to be moved to the back of the motor. So if I can find the connector for that. Yep, right there. That 2-pin sensor is on the front of the ZC motor. So I'm going to bring that back and wire it into here and then change these plugs over to the OBD1 style plugs. Another thing while I'm there is up front, my transmission uses a different type of connector. It has a rectangular gray connector, whereas on the EF it uses 2 bullet connectors. That's for the reverse lights. Next up there is the water temp and the for the gauge and the water temp for the ECU. Both those connectors are the same, don't have to make any changes there. But there are some missing plugs. Now that I have a VTEC solenoid, I'm going to have to add single wire VTEC solenoid, and I'm going to have to add VTEC oil pressure. If I am able to find a 92, 93 GSR ECU to run this, I'm going to want the VTEC oil pressure. That's necessary as part of running this car. And I would like to kind of keep it legal for emissions, and the easiest way to do that is use a 92, 93 Integra GSR ECU. All right, so moving around to more VTEC sensors, we have right here the knock sensor. It's tucked way up underneath here. That's a single wire. I'm going to have to add that as well. I hadn't put on my injector plugs yet because I wasn't sure what injectors I was running. I am going to now run some injectors that do not use the resistor. So I'll go ahead and put those up and get those connectors on. Next, let's address this right here. This is a pair of bullet connectors that go on your radiator fan switch. Now, on an OBD0 car like CRX, that switch is on the back of the block here. Now it's been moved over here. It's this little round connector right here. That round connector uses a different style plug. Same kind of plug you find on the knock sensor, the same kind of plug you find on the idler air control valve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these wires back and then put the correct plug on there for that. Another problem here is my alternator. Now I could go and look for a 9091 alternator and bolt it in place here. That would work just fine. That way I wouldn't have to change this connector. But at some point later on, I'm probably going to wind up going to a newer B18C. So I'm going to go ahead now and change this connector out for the rectangular style one that goes with this particular alternator. But otherwise, the wires reach nicely. Size-wise, everything pretty much reaches with the exception of this. This is the oil pressure idiot light. It's just a bullet connector. Somebody has removed the oil pressure sensor and put a fitting here. Obviously, they had a remote oil pressure sensor. I think it was for a gauge cluster. I'm going to go ahead and put the oil pressure sensor back there, and then I'm going to probably lengthen this about 3 inches so that when I have the wiring harness all tucked up underneath the manifold nice and neat, it'll be able to reach down there. EACV plug is the same, so no problem there. The intake air temperature sensor is the same on this particular manifold that's over here on this end runner, so it reaches without any problem. So just really a few modifications I have to do. So I'm going to get to that. By the way, I already wired the car for each one of those things, so that all that stuff is existing and is the right color. So it should be fairly easy for me to just go ahead and add a few wires I need to on the harness with the right connector, and I'll be good to go. So with that, I'm going to take this home, open it up on my bench, go ahead and make the necessary changes, and get this thing back on the motor so we can get it in the car. Okay, finally, harness is done, harness is on the engine, pretty much everything's done. By the way, this harness fits a little bit tight, and if you're modifying an SI harness, you're going to find it fits a little bit tight, and that's because this engine is actually quite a bit bigger. So be careful when you're doing things, make sure you lengthen stuff that you need to, so in order for it to reach. I luckily didn't have to lengthen too much, which was good. One other thing is, when you put this on, make sure you tighten this bolt right here. This is called the ground wire. Not tightening this ground has sidetracked countless swaps. I can't tell you how many times I've had people call me with problems, and the problem was just a simple fix of tightening that one ground wire on the thermostat housing. It can cause problems with the distributor, with the main relay, with the injectors, with the fuel pump, and sometimes people just go nuts trying to figure out what it is. And I have had people swear to me up and down that they tighten up that wire, and then a week later I finally find out that, you know, it took them 4 or 5 days before they finally checked it, and everything runs fine. Make sure you tighten that up. Anyway, we're ready to put this thing in the car, and I think that's going to bring us to a conclusion on this particular episode of VTEC Academy. So please, if you like what you see, like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell button if you want to get notifications when we're doing another video on our Backmarker E-app. Please join us next time when we're putting this engine in and we try to get it running. Thanks.